How you doing there, Reject Nation? I'm Greg Alba.
I'm John Humphrey.
We're doing a video podcast. Yeah. No one does podcasts. We're the first ones ever to do it.
What's a podcast?
Well, John, it's where we just talk, don't edit ourselves. We're uncensored, unfiltered, act like we're just hanging out and talking, but really we're still recording and filming a video. So one of our top reward tiers at our Patreon page is whatever video you request we must do and put up on YouTube. And a few of our top reward tier patrons have been requesting video podcasts, which I'm very much grateful for. I like doing these. This one is going to be a little bit more structured, only because we got quite a bit of people to quickly run through. But this comes from Andrew Hayes, and he has a wonderful YouTube channel, by the way. You guys should go check that out as soon as you can. He's been on The Real Rejects. He covers movie reviews, sometimes talks about wrestling and movie and TV shows and stuff. Anyway, his reward tier request is best directorial debuts. And, it's like we could have just taken what he requested and made it like a top 10 list, but why do that? It's a video podcast. We're just going to go through so many directors in any random order that we wish to.
Just name off some good ones, some great ones, in fact.
Yeah, and also, I'm sure there's going to be directors that we do not mention that you're going to be like, why didn't you mention this?
You forgot!
Instead of getting pissed at us, you know what you can do? Just put it in the comment boxes. Engagement! So yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so many here. I'm just gonna kick it off. I'm gonna start with the most cliche one, and you know what, John? Since we have so many, I'm gonna cross them off as we go, so we don't have to keep searching.
Take a picture of the initial list. And off to the races.
My first one that I would probably want to mention is Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like trust me, there's more not so cliche answers that we have coming your way. But Tarantino with Reservoir Dogs, I think Soderbergh is someone who's on this list, but Soderbergh really kicked off a lot of the independent filmmaking era that we got in the 90s, even though Sex, Lies, and Videotape was in 89. Mm-hmm. What Tarantino did with Reservoir Dogs kind of catapulted everything.
I feel like Reservoir Dogs is the most important directorial debut, perhaps, of our generation.
Yeah, and I think out of the independent filmmaking generation as well, because in the 80s, where they weren't as experimental or as willing to try out new things, Reservoir Dogs sort of pushed it onto the map in a way where it was a weird structure, it was different, and yet he got very fortunate that he was able to get such a pretty big cast.
An amazing cast.
Yeah. And it's like him directing it. He hadn't directed anything else before. And, I was actually hearing an interview with him recently. There's this wonderful interview you could watch that it was from the El Rey Network, Robert Rodriguez's channel or his network.
Like director back and forth.
Yeah,
show,
and there's a 2-part YouTube cut you could watch. It comes out to like 90 minutes or something like that. And Rodriguez was going into all this like history of how he became the first like rock and roll pop culture sort of director, because everywhere he went, he was like swarmed by fans and everything like that. I mean, that what really solidified that was his follow up with Pulp Fiction. But Reservoir Dogs, I feel, is, even if it's not your favorite Tarantino film or even one of your favorites from the 90s, there's no doubt it is one of the most important films if we're talking about the 90s. So, yeah, I would say Tarantino with he's been very consistent since.
Yeah. I mean,
and evolving.
Yeah, and really growing as a filmmaker. That's what evolving means.
Yeah.
Just trying to yes and you there.
There you go. Who would you mention here?
Like, oddly enough, I figured if we do one from very recent, let's go back a little ways. And this is one we just watched recently, and it's been fresh in my mind. And when I was, kind of thinking about and looking up directorial debuts, and I found this one, I was kind of shocked that John Huston's first movie was The Maltese Falcon, because that movie does hold up pretty well. I mean, we both just watched it recently. It's a pretty great mystery, and it's a pretty iconic film noir. And
it's like the defining film noir.
Yeah, and it's one that took, out of the pulp novels, detective novels and stuff, and really gave us our first truest iteration of that style on screen, and paved the way for a whole genre, and one that has warped and persisted and grown over time, And that's a movie that even to this day, is still pretty compelling. Like I said in that podcast, we watched that in film school, or not even film school, high school, and it was one of the few classics that even the high school kids was like, yeah, this is pretty good.
I mean, it was something we touched on, was how, classic films of that era are not exactly my go-to catalog to search for. I'm like, what new film film have I not seen that I want to check out? But watching that movie was a surprisingly very easy watch, and felt a lot of moderning in the cinematography. So if you guys haven't seen that, it's a great film.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to go very recent here. Ari Aster.
Hereditary. It's a great call.
That movie blew, like that. One thing you'll hear a lot with a lot of these directors with their directorial debuts is, there's like people on here. That's what I mean. Rather than making a list, I just keep talking about people. Like Robert Rodriguez, his debut was with El Mariachi, which is very rough around the edges and had this sort of B-movie grindhouse-esque sort of quality to it, which brought a lot of its charm. And that it came out the same year as Reservoir Dogs. And from my understanding, because I heard that interview recently, it seemed like Tarantino and Rodriguez were actually friends even before that. Cool. I thought that was what made them friends, because we both have these huge independent hits, but they sort of were collaborative already, or like we're in class together, something like that. If I forget, I could be wrong about that.
Donating plasma together.
Basically, right now we're in the middle of a move, and was doing like I had it playing in the background while I was packing a bunch of stuff. So, and I think that's what I picked up on. Either way, their first films debuted together that year, and something like Robert Rodriguez, where, I mean, it's pretty, even as charming, and even though out of the El Mariachi trilogy, a lot of people still say that is the best one, there's a reason why he went and redid it again with Desperado, because he felt he could have done it better and had a better confident hand with his direction and editing with it, even though it's still, the Desperado is not the preferred one, generally speaking. El Mariachi had that flavor, whereas a lot of these directors seem like they've had so many years of experience. And Ari Aster demonstrated that with Hereditary, this surefire, confident hand with his direction, where you're like, what else is this guy? This is his first film? What the hell?
Yeah,
son of a bitch. It's one of those.
So striking as a first film. And it's one of those, like somebody else who I'm sure we'll mention pretty soon. This might actually be a great segue to Jordan Peele for Get Out, because both of those guys, with Hereditary and Get Out, you watch both those movies and you're like, man, this is your first feature, but like it looks like you sculpted every inch of this, you know? And that's part of what makes Hereditary so damn impressive too, is because even if you don't love where the story goes all the time, it is just so quintessentially itself,
Yeah, well, I think with Jordan Peele with Get Out, he's, other than of course all the amount of studying he's done, I think with the amount of genre blending that took place on Key and Peele, even though everything had to be funny, there was a lot of genre blending, and he had a lot of experience that he brought to there. And I think what he did with Get Out was, it's very impressive too, when and a lot of these directors, I think, it's not just their first film they've directed, but also the first feature they wrote. You know?
Probably the one that they spent the most time with,
something that's like a real baby of theirs. And Get Out, I heard he spent like 6 years working on that film or something like that.
Had the script at least for 6 years.
Whenever you hear people say that, you just imagine like that's all they worked on for 6 years.
Every day.
It's really not the case. A lot of it is like I took a break from it for like a few months, and then I went back and revisited it.
It's just been percolating over that stretch of time.
Exactly. You've been letting it sort of grow. People, I think, get this impression that they just slaved away at it for 6 term. Like, that's not how it actually went down. But yeah, Jordan Peele with Get Out is something that I feel like you have to mention on this list for the wave.
Totally.
It sort of brought in. It's like something made an impact when other films in the genre suddenly just immediately get compared to it.
Totally, and make you a household name like right off the bat.
And speaking of horror, this director, what's funny about this guy
is he's a bitch.
No, don't speak ill of the dead. George Romero, Night of the Living Dead.
That is a good call.
I don't think John knew I was going to bring him up.
I wondered at the point that joke happened for multiple reasons. Rest in peace.
George Romero in Night of the Living Dead. That's not my favorite in his franchise. Dawn of the Dead is my favorite one. And you know what? I think Land of the Dead is pretty amazing. Because I had a backwards experience with the Of the Dead franchise. I watched Land of the Dead first in the theaters because I was just curious curious to check it out. And ended up watching it twice, as I loved it so much. And then I went backwards and I watched Dawn of the Dead, then Day of the Dead, then Night of the Living Dead. You know, so it was a real like weird, unchronological. But the thing with that,
the last one in black and white.
yeah. So, but Night of the Living Dead is the film that's been remade like a couple of times now. It's a defining zombie genre. It's like that is the genre right
yeah,
there.
I mean, it sets so many of the genre, like, you know, in a similar way, I would imagine, to how, you know, Maltese Falcon set those cinematic earmarks for film noir. So did this for the zombie horror movie, because, you know, like the zombies as we know them now come out of that movie basically.
Yeah. Well, the thing with film noir is a genre that you don't really hear movies come out today that are pitched as a film noir. It's like you'll find out, oh, this film has qualities of a film noir.
You'll hear the word noir grafted on the back of other.
You'll hear like
genres.
critics say that.
Yeah.
You'll hear like, oh, Brick comes out, Rian Johnson's movie.
Yeah.
Was that his original review? We should have looked that up.
That's a good question.
Yeah. So Brick comes out, people say, oh, film noir, but you know, it's not being pitched as a film noir. And so like Maltese Falcon, black and white, that era, you know, you would hear that as a genre.
Yeah.
But something with Night of the Living Dead, I feel like that's a genre that's really evolved and has changed. Like I wouldn't say Night of the Living Dead is, some might argue it is because it's the staple, it's the first one. It's the best zombie movie, but it's really not even like in my top 5.
I actually really love that
That's
movie,
me personally.
To be honest with you, there's something about it that has like I love Dawn of the Dead too, and I gotta like it's been a long time since I've seen a lot of the other sequels. I have the most familiarity with those two, but Night of the Living Dead really does kind of stick up there in my mind as one of my favorite horror movies, and maybe it's because that it is a little bit less I don't know, there's something about the black and white charm and the isolation of everything and just sort of the aesthetic. There's something about the aesthetic of that movie that I just really do love from a genuine place. So
well, to me it sort of feels like what Rodriguez had with El Mariachi.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like not much of a
totally.
budget, you got a lot of things to work around here, a lot of compromises you got to make, and with those limitations you made something great.
Yeah,
and
totally.
So it does have that level of charm to it where you could feel the low budget, you know.
Yeah, totally. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Well done.
And Rian Johnson with Brick. There you go, guys.
Wouldn't it? Yeah. Research paid off. I saw that movie in the theaters with my dad, and you know, whenever that came out, when I was probably pretty young.
Yeah, I don't know the JGL Joseph Gordon-Levitt. In case you guys don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what Joseph Gordon-Levitt's career in terms of acting was like, but I really think that movie specifically put him on the map, or at least in the eyes of, man, that kid from Third Rock from the Sun, really fucking act,
Angels
man.
in the Outfield.
Yeah.
I think that movie really did a lot to catapult him into an adult star, you know, out of child acting, because you know, it didn't do the same thing for Lucas Haas.
True.
You know, he was also in that movie, but that's, you know, an awesome example of something that is really in the film noir tradition, but is also very much in the neo-noir tradition as well. It's very modern. It takes its own versions of the slang and of the specific imagery and the types of situations, but it plays them in its own quirky way. And so, yeah, it's I feel like that's a great example of a true neo-noir, because it does so many of these stylistic earmarks, but it really translates them to the now.
Absolutely. And yeah, that was a great one.
Totes.
And David Lynch, I feel, for some reason, just looking over the list, I'm like, he feels like a good transition.
Yeah. David Lynch, gotta get surreal, man.
Yeah, David Lynch with Eraserhead. He came onto the scene with that at a really interesting time, because, like I said, the 80s... I remember actually in that interview, Tarantino was saying that the 80s were like a very sort of oppressive time, even in filmmaking, that they weren't really daring. And I believe, Eraserhead came out like late 70s, pretty much. 76. So mid to somewhere there.
Mid to late 70s.
Something like that. Yeah, there you go.
What do we call 76?
So Eraserhead came out then, and which seems kind of more appropriate for the 70s, but so it was right at the time when filmmaking was about to not become as crazy.
Crazy,
you know?
yeah. It's like on the cusp. You're probably seeing, the transitions out of the, really protracted naturalistic stuff into kind of maybe a midway ground between those, where it's kind of weird and crazy, but it's also grounded and there's a lot of space,
I feel like you could probably comment on Eraserhead better than I can.
I can't, because I haven't seen Eraserhead.
Oh wow, you haven't seen Eraserhead?
No, I'm working my way higgledy-piggledy through David Lynch.
It's one of those movies I shouldn't have watched when I was a kid, and I barely remember it, but I remember it being very disturbing. Yep.
I really want to. Like,
bottom line, even if we haven't seen Eraserhead, or haven't seen it recently, it should be on this list.
Like, I am ashamed because that is a movie I really do want to see, and that's
it's like a defining body horror movie.
Yeah, and I fantasize about doing little units for myself of like going back and reviewing certain directors' filmographies, and David Lynch is definitely one I want to do that with. So when we follow up on this podcast, I'll have things to say.
And I also think another here's how we've been doing this. We've just been transitioning around and not going in order. And I think a transition from that, a good one, would have to be Bradley Cooper with The Stars.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Cue that intro from the free for all.
A Star Is Born is that directorial debut where I could feel an intimate passion for like a lot of heart for what he's working on there. A lot of times it's like you get a wide variety of directorial debuts. Some people really go for the heavy. Some people really go for sort of something that's like weird and different. It's something you haven't seen before. And A Star Is Born, even that was my favorite movie of last year. It wasn't, something that we necessarily haven't seen before, though. I'd say that. But
we've seen it 4 times.
Yeah, essentially, factoring in the fact that it's like the third remake, fourth one of The Star Is Born. Factoring that in, either way, it was an interesting debut because, like I said, it's the thing that stood out to me was the heart and love for what he was crafting there, as opposed to trying to do something completely original and completely different. It was the communication of emotions that I really felt.
Yeah. It was just so kind of had its heart on its sleeve. It was so kind of emotionally forward with everything.
And for actor turned director, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Let's keep everything really fluid and very close up and very intimate. And this is actually a nice segue, I think, to talking about another actor turned director. Got a few actor
turned directors here. Yeah.
So let's just do a gamut. Yeah. But one film that really impressed me from a first-time director, long-time actor, first-time caller, long-time fan, is Joel Edgerton's The Gift.
Yeah.
Because that movie is kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum in the sense that it is very potent emotionally, but it is also very deliberate and very almost like Hitchcockian in its tension and release and use of suspense and stuff like that. It has a certain clinical reservedness about it while also, again, being very effective.
Yeah,
and very harrowing in a lot of ways.
Well, a lot of times with the actors turn directors, especially depending on the genre they've come from, especially in the acting field. I think Jordan Peele was a surprise for a lot of people because he came from Key and Peele, which was a very comedy.
Yeah.
And then Get Out's like, wow, that's a terrifying film.
Yeah.
Whereas The Gift, knowing Joel Edgerton's acting chops and like the genres he's worked in, like to see him transition to that, it wasn't a surprise. It's more of what he was embarking on, and I think it was smart for him not to be the lead in it, but as a
and kind of nice for him to play a character that gets kind of unlikable at times, pretty damn unlikable at times.
Yeah. But it was the kind of role too that I think was, when you're working as a actor turned director, when you're doing that approach, it's the kind of role where you have to really feed a lot to the other actors. In order for them to work off of something when they're the main ones you need the response of. For Rebecca Hall? Rebecca Hall and Jason Bateman, yeah.
Well, that's very smart then, because, he's giving them the directions and he's also motivating most of the action in the story.
Exactly, yeah.
So, that's pretty great.
Mel Gibson, I think, the man without a face.
Eyes Without a Face.
Man Without a Face, Mel Gibson, I would say. As well as another, a lot of people kind of forget about that was his directorial debut. So I don't know if it's like worth mentioning on this list.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, you allow it. Honestly, I kind of don't really remember that movie, but I love Mel. Braveheart wasn't his first movie. I'm just gonna put that out there.
Okay,
a lot of people think it's Braveheart, but I'm like, that's not it.
So then I'm gonna throw in a segue real quick right there because I there's some shadow of doubt over this, but Sam Raimi, Evil Dead.
Sam Raimi is his first movie.
Yeah, the thing is, he made something that borders on feature length like 5 years or like 7 years before or something like that, called It's Murder. The thing is, I don't know really where you can find it and if it counts. So I think, at least with an asterisk by its name, The Evil Dead is, one of those films, which is not necessarily the best of its franchise either, but is responsible for a certain amount, I would think, of the 80s below budget horror wave and stuff like that, and has certainly been a big influence on us.
Yeah. No, Evil Dead is it's funny with a lot of these horror directors because you do kind of actually M. Night Shyamalan. People think Sixth Sense. People are always like Unbreakable, the second film, Sixth Sense. I'm like, no, that's not the case. He directed some movie like had Rosie O'Donnell in it, I think. Some weird comedy that he made.
Well, and he also made a movie that he starred in. Like his very first film, I think, was just like about him. It was like like a down to earth like character story or something like a character drama.
I think a lot of people tend to get confused as if like the first movie that made them like famous as a director they think is their first movie. When I'm like, no, that's not
like
it.
Your celebrity debut.
And I didn't have John Krasinski on this list, but I believe he did direct something before that, though, right? We're researching.
Well, are we
researching while we're?
Are we doing like if he directed TV, it doesn't count, or if it's like feature film debut?
No, I think he directed a movie right here. It says The Haulers, an hour and 28-minute movie.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, there you go.
Cross them off.
Taking them off.
That's what I mean.
Get out of here, Krasinski.
Quiet Place was his first film. Wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Also, another writer, actor turned director, Ben Affleck, for Gone Baby Gone, where he put his brother in there. Those Afflecks, man. Got a great reputation, don't they?
Killing the game, yeah. They're always
one sexually abuses, the other is an alcoholic. that's them right there.
Which one do you want to have lunch with?
The alcoholic.
Yeah.
I have to choose between two.
Good choice.
I haven't seen him become a rageful alcoholic. He seems like a depressive alcoholic.
That is true. That is actually...
Making fun of real people because they're famous, so we feel we have a right.
Because they don't come across as human. They're just characters from afar.
Characters we see on the media outlet. But Gone Baby Gone... that's not my favorite of the ones he's directed. I love The Town the most, but... Gone Baby Gone, I thought was was interesting in how he approached making the movie, because it's like Ben Affleck's name's the director, and I think he's a co-writer on it, and then he puts the Affleck name with his brother, who's nowhere near as famous, especially at the time. Like, more people know the Casey Affleck name now, but at the time, Casey Affleck was mainly known as Ben Affleck's brother.
Well, and and you still know the Affleck name, but you have to root Casey through Ben.
Yeah, but that was I feel like what he demonstrated there got even more fine tuned with things like Argo and.
The Town,
the one that's my favorite. Yeah, with Argo and The Town, where Gone Baby Gone was a interesting, dramatic, dramatic thriller kidnapping movie, solving the case there, watching whatever corruption is unfolding in the Boston PD and stuff like that, and that right, like dealing with what he did there. I thought he did a little bit better in The Town, but Gone Baby Gone where the thrills of The Town and Argo are present. Gone Baby Gone really kind of doubles down on the dramatic side and less on the thrill side, at least from my personal viewing experience.
Okay.
Maybe I shouldn't have watched The Town first.
That's possible.
But because Gone Baby Gone, I've always registered more as like a heavy drama.
That's how it came across to me.
Whereas the other films he's done have more thrills in them,
Yeah, a little more exploitable elements.
But let's mix it up. Choose someone different, John.
I am going to choose Orson Welles, arguably perhaps the greatest directorial debut, only because he just did fucking everything on that movie. He wrote it, I think, he directed it, he stars in it, he is the only film he had complete control over.
I mean, War of the Worlds was something he was known for. There was the radio show at the time, right? Mm-hmm. And he fought for just he's a pretty OCD guy. He wanted all the control. He wanted all the control. It wasn't like no one was helping him. He fought to keep all the control in pre-production, post-production, say over final cut.
Yeah.
Everything he had complete control over. So in a lot of ways, even though he was a controlling dude, it is the greatest directorial debut, arguably, because especially when knowing how it's like the film student thing to say, Citizen Kane, one of the best movies.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, like, I've seen it a couple times, and I think it's a compelling movie. It's not my favorite movie by any stretch of the imagination, but I see what's to be appreciated.
It's a remarkable achievement.
Yeah, and it is, like, just, even though there are other people involved, I'm still just like, I'm sure that he micromanaged you, though. Like,
Definitely. Definitely.
Certainly seems like that is, just a through and through. It's just Orson Welles. That movie is him.
And also what I like to call the three Steves, who unintentionally just got stacked together by process of deleting names off this list. Steven Soderbergh, Steve McQueen, and Steven Spielberg. Spielberg's kind of in that weird ground. Because Duel is like the most well-known TV movie ever, you know?
And it's kind of crazy and out there, and it's got a very, like, high concept about it. So
because he did Duel, and then his first movie to the big screen, it started Goldie Hawn. I can't remember. It was I remember the plot better than I do Sugarland Express, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
Like, then he did Jaws. Right. But Duel, it's a TV movie. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of weird to, it wasn't the feature for the guy who talks against Netflix. It's kind of funny. You
got your kickoff doing a TV movie. Maybe that's why, though. Maybe he's like, I couldn't get nominated for an Academy Award for Duel.
Yeah. I think what has helped Duel's claim to fame sort of rise is the fact that it's kind of gotten the Jaws comparison, because Jaws was the defining the start of the blockbuster movies, and people will go, well, if you saw his work in Duel, and I think because of that comparison and trying to find out where did this fucking art for Jaws come from, and then you go to, and I think that the talk of Duel sort of allowed Duel to become more famous.
Yeah,
Plus,
it kickstarted the killer truck genre.
Yeah, there's so many great movies.
So many.
Joyride. That's about all I can think of.
Episode of Supernatural.
Yeah, so Spielberg there, Soderbergh, like I said, because that was 89 Sex, Lies, and Videotape. But, that was a very... Soderbergh is great at mixing it up, but, like, that was another one where, like, unbelievable, confident direction for a first-time debut. I think he wrote the film as well. And I don't really remember the movie, honestly.
I was going to say, is it one of the ones where I know he is, as a director, is really into doing kind of unorthodox things or trying out new tech or whatever?
Yeah, and it was an edgy movie. It's called Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and it's a very adult movie and a very edgy film. But it's a damn good one. I remember that. I remember being like, it's a damn good one. But like I said, like there's Soderbergh in 89 and Tarantino in 92, which really catapulted it. But I really think Soderbergh deserves a lot of credit for sort of starting off that independent filmmaking era.
Oh yeah, and continuing to cultivate it over time, and really sticking to, I mean, Tarantino and Soderbergh have stuck to their guns in a lot of their own ways, but for real, like, Soderbergh will oscillate back and forth between like, oh, that's in a movie theater, like
right.
a megaplex, and then it'll be like something that plays on 5 screens that was like shot on an iPhone with like only people who aren't actors and stuff. And I like that he still bounces around, those different things.
And of course, the last Steve McQueen, with Hunger.
Was this the prison movie?
Yeah, the prison one based on a true story, which kickstarted. And I think him and Ryan Coogler kind of did a similar thing, where and Ryan Coogler is on this list. For Fruitvale Station. Both these directors found their go-to actor.
Yeah.
What I find funny is Steve McQueen does Hunger with Michael Fassbender, right? Ryan Coogler does Fruitvale Station with Michael B. Jordan. The next film, I think Steve McQueen's next film was Shame with Michael Fassbender. Yeah. Ryan Coogler's was it Creed?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Creed. And then their third film, their go-to actor was the villain.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
hell yeah. Damn.
Steve McQueen puts Michael Fassbender as, there's a lot of villains in
Yeah.
12 Years a Slave. There's a lot of villains.
But he's a particularly nasty.
But he is the
plantation
main
slave driver.
antagonist
Yeah.
out of them all in the movie. Like, out of all the antagonists you will remember, it is definitely Michael Fassbender in that movie. And then, of course, Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger and Black Panther. Steve, but with Hunger, Steve McQueen made that was another one with the confident hand behind the camera for a directorial debut.
Yeah.
And that right there, Coogler has managed to really go into mainstream.
Oh yeah.
Steve McQueen's kicked off with something very not for everyone, very edgy, uncomfortable to sit through. And Coogler, had more of that independent touch with Fruitvale Station.
But Fruitvale Station is a very warm movie in a lot of ways, and it's not like wrenching until it gets wrenching.
Yeah. But with Hunger, that is it's a difficult film to sit through. It's a great film to sit through, though. I haven't seen Shame, though.
Oh, get ready for the fun. Get ready for sex addict Michael Fassbender.
Because when he tried going a little more mainstream, Steve McQueen with
Widows?
With Widows, which I liked, it didn't really fully appeal to everyone.
Well, I gotta imagine that even if he was to make a mainstream blockbuster, it would still be very filmy.
Yes.
It would still be very fleshed out and very, thick.
Because he's sort of stayed in that direction with uncomfortable, pushing the boundaries, raw realism, Steve McQueen's filmmaking style. Mm-hmm. Whereas Ryan Coogler can really adjust to the genre he's working in.
Yeah, totally.
And Fruitvale Station is something you could probably speak a little more on, because you saw it recently.
Yeah,
a couple months ago, right?
I saw all the Ryan Coogler joints in reverse order. So I saw, Black Panther, then I saw Creed, and then I saw Fruitvale. And Fruitvale was just one that I put on because I was just compelled one day. I was flipping through movies. And that is such a lively, it just really took me by surprise, because it is very of its time and place, but it's also very lively and very alive. I was expecting something to be very heavy, whereas most of the movie you're just peering into this guy's life and really learning to sympathize and empathize and love this guy. And then I just spent the whole last 20 minutes just crying, ugly crying.
I gotta, yeah.
Because it's a really affecting movie for sure.
I'm looking at one more director while we go through. It's a lot of these directors are sort of popping into my head as we're doing it. Yeah. No, okay, good thing we did not put him on here. So I guess we haven't really talked about any female directors.
No, we
haven't.
Might
as well talk about a couple.
Yeah.
Jennifer Kent for The Babadook.
I adore that movie. Yes.
That is one of my favorite. I've only seen it one time, and it quickly made the list. Top 5 favorite horror movies. I
actually have the pop-up books.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
It's become quite a big collectible. But yeah, The Babadook is this psychological horror. That's one of those the hugely misadvertised. Film. There's gonna be a crazy.
Get ready for an in-your-face monster movie.
Yeah, and it's not that at all. And I barely. I didn't. I've seen the trailer maybe one time, and then years later I watched The Babadook. Yeah. But so I just sort of watched it with a fresh lens, and I do love that film, and I think that is a beautifully haunting movie.
Yeah, when it has
a surprise ending that you have to sort of read into.
Yeah.
Not sort of. I think you do have to read into it to fully grasp what's sort of happening there.
Yeah, I mean, I get what's kind of divisive for some people about that movie, but to me it's one that gives you both. It gives you a convincing and compelling and claustrophobic and oppressive monster movie, but it also gives you, this psychological exploration of this single mother, and all the anguish that comes with that, and all the just tricky life things that come with that. And it's another one of those debuts that is so assured, and also is very rich in its film history in a sense, because there's so much that borrows from old silent movies and old German expressionism and things like that. And so you watch it and you're like, wow, this feels like it would have been your third or fourth film.
Right. And some other female directors are popping in my mind. I just want to confirm that I am correct about this.
Who do we got?
Okay, not Catherine Bigelow. I was gonna say Near Dark, but I haven't seen her first film, so I can't comment on her first film. Patty Jenkins, was her first movie Monster?
I feel like she's got a pretty limited filmography. So
From my understanding, she's only directed 2 movies. That's always been... No, it says directed 14 movies. 14 right here. Yeah, her first movie was Monster, Patty Jenkins.
Not bad.
I was trying to think, there's got to be other female directors I just haven't thought of. But Patty Jenkins with Monster, that was an indie film that was talked about. And I feel like you will have heard of that movie even if you weren't into films. Like if you were, there's a lot of indie films that come out of people are like, never heard of it. But Monster was one of them. I think Charlize Theron's performance was a big reason why a lot of people had heard of that movie. But the way she was able to, it's pretty crazy how she could sort of just hop from Monster into Wonder Woman, which are 2 very different films. But still have this level of understanding the humanity behind this very famous serial killer. At the same time, not creating a sympathetic case for her. Just a very human tale, which was pretty... Have you seen
impressive. No, I haven't. I've seen bits and pieces of it.
It's a very, very raw film. And you know what? I don't really hear this word described for it, but it's a cool movie. I never hear that word for it, but I thought... This is a cool film. Not every part of it is cool. There's some disturbing shit that goes on, but it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's kind of a weird word association, but it is. I think it's a pretty cool film. And this one is a film I barely do remember. And weirdly, I discovered this was her first film before filming by accident because I'm a big fan of the movie The Invitation, and I was like, oh, is that Karen Kusuma's first film? And it wasn't. It was this movie called
It was Jennifer's Body.
Jennifer's Body.
Which I actually do like.
How she bounced back is crazy. Jennifer's Body's gotten a lot more respect over the years.
Yeah.
Karen Kusuma did a movie called Girlfight, which is the main reason I remember that movie is because it's Michelle Rodriguez's best performance you'll ever see. Like you watch a trailer for it, even now you watch a trailer, it looks like just a generic, gonna become a boxer movie. But there is a real level of nuance and depth that you did not expect that got brought to life in there. And, you gotta just give credit for, like, Michelle Rodriguez is sort of just really typecast as, like, tough chick in action movies or something. When, like she just demonstrated in Widows, she can really fucking act. And Girlfight really should have been put her on the map even more than just that. It's like the trailer just made it look like she's a tough boxer chick, but that's not it. Like that is a really, really damn good drama.
I've always gotten that's the one of hers I still need to see of Karen Kusuma's films, but I always got that sense that it had both, because we're used to the kind of blockbuster tough Michelle Rodriguez, but I got the sense from that movie that you would get the very human and the tough.
Yes, shouts out to that.
Yeah.
All right, just got a few more directors to go through here.
All right. There's another director with kind of a limited filmography at the moment, but one of my favorite movies in general is District 9, and that would be Neil Blomkamp's debut.
Wouldn't it be fair to put it on the same level as Citizen Kane? But it's wildly normally. What I'll say about that is normally when you get that kind of movie, you will have at least done something smaller. Think of everyone who's been attached to direct a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
They've all done something a lot smaller, and then they graduate to this giant fucking CGI practical, like something crazy, right? Neil Blomkamp comes onto the scene with this crazy, intimate, but big sci-fi movie,
Yeah, right? That kind of does, it's another one of those films that does both things because it has all that stuff you want. It has the aliens and the robotics and stuff. And it does, the thing is, he does have, a pretty solid background in making shorts and doing visual animation and stuff like that. So, like, his stylistic earmarks had been at work before that movie. But, it is one that has all that cool shit, but also a very affecting and a very relevant story about one person going through a change and also about oppression in general. And it's weird too to think about that movie because
and it is his best film.
It is, as much as I like all of his stuff, I do think it is his best and the one I could argue that you need to see the clearest.
Right.
And it's funny because talking about the level, thinking like, oh, usually this would be something that somebody had, done something smaller before. This was supposed to be Halo. It was supposed to be something bigger. And then, through whatever series of events, it got to be its own little original thing. And I think I'm
happy about that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful happenstance, I feel like.
All right. So we got that one. And then, just spitballing here. Tim Burton with Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Okay. Hey, man, people love Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Who was Pee-wee before that? Was he a show?
Wasn't it Pee-wee's Playhouse?
Yeah.
Pee-wee comes to your place.
It was funny is Pee-wee's, like, Edward Scissorhands is like the defining Tim Burton origin, I think.
I feel like that is the top tier of things people would associate.
Or Beetlejuice. With. No, it was Beetlejuice, then Edward Scissorhands.
I feel like Beetlejuice came first. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Beetlejuice first, and then Edward Scissorhands. Like those movies, but for him to come on for Pee-wee's Big Adventure, like that's a pretty good director because that's regarded as a pretty damn good film,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I forget, was that 80s?
Oh, maybe. It would have had to have been, right? Because when was Beetlejuice? I'm not sure.
I think Beetlejuice is late 80s. Yeah, that makes I mean by chronicle
movie release day.
Just to put that together there myself. Another actor turned director, or was he really acting? Kevin Costner.
Kevin Cosplay.
I don't remember the lineage of Kevin Costner.
Oh yeah, he was acting, and I mean he stars in that movie too, and that's a movie that gets pulled up whenever people need an earmark for an Avatar type tale. I feel like when Avatar came out, I started hearing a lot more things likened to It's Dances with Wolves, but but that is a pretty great movie, and it's weird. I saw it. I haven't seen it in a while, but I saw it a lot growing up because my mom and sister especially are into like historical westerns.
That was my dad's movie.
Was it?
He had like this giant. I mean, the movie was like fucking long as shit, but it was also on Laserdisc, and he had like the special collectors, like 5 discs. It cost like $200. Laserdisc back then were already like $50 for one disc. So yeah,
go down to Dave's Laser Place.
Yeah,
remember that? Yeah.
And then we had also Rotation Video.
Yeah, Rotation.
Places that are out of business now. Too bad.
Yeah. Oh, I got one that was heavily influential in both of our lives, and that would be Anchorman, the directorial debut of Adam McKay.
It's funny talking about this now when their company, Gary Sanchez Productions, just fell apart.
Yeah. And they just had this whole like we're still friends, but we're just not going to work together on anything anymore.
I mean, it sounded like just like when I heard that, it's not. Some people like have a warning sign about that of. Not a warning sign, but thinking maybe they had a falling out. And like, no, what are you talking about? So Will Ferrell's still doing shit like Holmes and Watson.
Yeah, exactly.
Adam McKay's doing Vice.
He's doing Oscar nominees.
Yeah, he's doing things with like Prestige around there, So it just makes sense. But yeah, Adam, that is the. I mean, some people prefer like Talladega Nights. Some people even prefer Step Brothers. But to me, Anchorman is the best. That's my favorite one.
I feel like any Adam McKay joint is probably a time and place thing for you. But yeah, this one was like we were all quoting it.
That's his sharpest one.
I think so, and it does. It
doesn't feel like improv movie,
but it has all the good parts of improv movie in it.
Yeah,
because it is unwieldy and loose, but it's still like contained.
But you can't really quite tell when it's improvised and when it's scripted. It's like you're not sure which one it is.
Yeah. And while it is kind of a long movie,
it's so sharply edited.
Of all of them, it is the one that kind of is the least too long.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
For his earmarks.
Well, it's funny when you watch Anchorman and then you see what he's done with things like The Big Short. I haven't seen Vice yet, but when you see what he's done with things like The Big Short, you could see like the trinklets of his transition there. It wasn't like what Todd Phillips has done with his life.
Directorial debut, road trip. Hell yeah.
Because you watch Anchorman, it's just a little Adam K tangent I want to go on. You watch Anchorman, which it seems to have a real clear sense of what the news station was like in the 70s. Yeah. Like it's a very, as funny as it is and wacky as it is, it seemed to have a real in-depth understanding about it.
It bothers to pay, and I think what the key to a lot of their collaborations is they bother to pay a lot of attention to the culture that they're setting them in even though they are super silly and ridiculous.
That's why I think like the movie doesn't get accused of being sexist because it's kind of commentating on the environment.
It's that time where
I hear their menstrual blood attracts bears. Like just how stupid men were back then.
And that is that highlights the satire with some farce to go with it, just in case you were in any way confused.
And then also with the other guys, where he's talking about like like Ponzi schemes and stuff, and then even educating us at the end of the movie. And I love that. You see that he had a transitional period. It wasn't just what the hell, The Big Short.
And Will Ferrell helped.
Exactly. There's a couple of directors on here. Like I have back and forth. Like J. Richard Kelly for Donnie Darko, which is his only movie. It seems like he's done other movies, but it feels like that's his only movie.
I found him when I was researching because it came to mind, and I was thinking about the criteria for a great directorial debut, because the thing I was wondering too is, do you need to prove longevity to have a great debut, or is just the great first movie that's it? Because J. Richard Kelly has not made anything that people even seem to regard as quality since Donnie Darko, and his director's cut of Donnie Darko is often less well received.
Well, I think certain films like that you have a harder time following up. You know what I mean?
It is so specific.
It's like the weight and the pressure to follow up, because everyone kind of wants a Donnie Darko 2.
Do what you did last time.
It's kind of like with the thing Jordan Peele had to face with doing Us. Is like people were automatically gonna go, is it better than Get Out? And like we were aware that was gonna happen, and sure enough, you hear some people like, Get Out compared. Like, that's the way it goes. And I just don't think he was able to follow it up. I met him, hung out with him once. That's not like some fluff that I actually legit hung out with the guy. I didn't realize who it was till halfway through the night. I was like, oh, you did that. That's cool. And, like Toby Hooper's kind of a similar case, I feel. Because of Texas Chainsaw, and that's kind of what everyone associates Toby Hooper for, is that first movie he made.
I feel like that is Toby Hooper's undeniable classic. I mean, there are other films that he's done that do have loved, that do have followings, that do have at least name recognition, but I would say that, especially with the amount of bickering that goes on about who directed Poltergeist, I feel like, Texas Chainsaw is his biggest calling card. Sure. And I love that movie a lot.
And funny, like I didn't put this like I wrote him down and then I deleted him and then I saw you wrote him down, so I was like, all right, we can mention him because despite my personal opinion on this movie, I don't hate this movie. I get pretty, and I love me some Mel. You know that? Yeah. Especially back then, Mel. But I putting my personal feelings to the side, it's like objectively speaking, it is regarded as a monumental film for its era and to kickstart a fucking fantastic franchise. Yeah. Mad Max.
I mean, I probably am
George Miller.
George Miller, Mad Max. And I probably am with you. I mean, like, I prefer Road Warrior or Fury Road to Mad Max for sure. But I will say that, for its place in time and for what it represents, for what it is, especially being, so tangibly independent. I do think it is at least of note.
I really don't even think you need to watch it to watch Road Warrior.
That's the other thing. Is that, like they're all kind of like, I don't know.
I watched them in order. I did, and I was like, we could have just skipped. I really felt I could have just skipped Mad Max and hopped on a Road Warrior.
Because Road Warrior is to Mad Max kind of what Evil Dead 2 is to Evil Dead. It's like there's kind of like they catch you back up, and then you're kind of in a similar situation again.
But you know how like films we were talking about with Evil Dead and El Mariachi and Night of the Living Dead, they all kind of have this charm of its low budget. They have this of like working within the containment of the restrictions and such
against constraints. And this is pretty great,
and that, and it works, and it adds this level of charm. Mad Max doesn't provide that for me. Instead, I'm kind of like this. I'm really bored. I know a lot of people. It's considered a great movie, and I am aware of that. I feel like I feel like it's one of those movies that people get afraid to admit they get bored through. But you know what? I get bored when I watch it. Yeah.
The flavor I recall of it is it's harsh and deliberate, and you got to be patient with it.
Yeah. Whereas I feel like Road Warrior is like, yeah, that's a badass movie. Yeah.
And actually, this makes
such a step up. You know?
Yeah. And this makes a good segue to a movie that at least I can talk about for a half second, because he just released another movie called Mandy, and that would be Panos Cosmatos, and I really enjoyed Beyond the Black Rainbow a lot, and that is a very striking and very impressive movie on a lot of levels, but I do feel that not anywhere near in the same way Mad Max to Road Warrior, but Beyond the Black Rainbow is very deliberate. You do have to be patient with it. It does have some of the crazy sci-fi stuff that the trailer shows you. It's not quite as watchable or not watchable, but it's not quite as crazy and propulsive as Mandy is. But I think it is a pretty astonishing, just oral visual achievement, especially for a first-time director who I hadn't really been aware of doing anything at the time. You see that movie and you're like, wow, somebody from a long time ago must have made 12 other movies like this before this happened. So,
all right, we got 5 minutes before we hit the 60-minute mark here, so let's wrap this up. We got 2 people left. And both movies I have not seen.
I have seen one of them, and that is this is Spinal Tap, which is Rob Reiner's debut.
You haven't seen Shawshank Redemption either?
No, we both haven't seen Shawshank Redemption.
The greatest movie of the 90s.
The greatest directorial debut.
Every time that is like, this is Spinal Tap. I might get that for not seeing it, but Shawshank for Frank Darabont. That's one where if I haven't seen it, everyone's like, I will murder you for not watching this movie.
Because everyone's allowed to cry during the Shawshank Redemption.
I surprisingly haven't had that ruined for me. I don't know what happens in that movie. I know the basic plot, but I don't know what goes on. That and Forrest Gump, both movies have not been ruined for me, surprisingly.
Hey, not BAD.
A cat kicking the camera there if you happen to be watching this late in the video.
Yeah, neither of us has seen Shawshank, and this is Spinal Tap is a heap
of fun. But we are so aware of the power of Shawshank that it has to be here.
I'm so aware that this is a great movie that deserves to be included.
And this is Spinal Tap, actor turned director Rob Reiner. Man.
Was he an actor?
Rob Reiner, yeah.
I guess that would make sense.
What do you mean? He has to have been an actor, right? He's always acting.
Not Carl Reiner.
Who's Carl Reiner?
The guy who talks like this.
I always knew Rob Reiner as an actor first, and then a director.
I feel like I mostly know Rob Reiner as a director.
Okay, he's been acting since 1961.
All right, well then I'm a stupid idiot.
And then this is Spinal Tap was 1984. Yeah.
Maybe I just know Carl Reiner's face so much more. So okay. I just don't associate
Carl
Rob
Reiner from Ocean's 11.
Yeah.
He's in that, right?
Oh wow, I totally mixed him up just now with Alan Arkin. Anyway, Carl Reiner. Yeah. Isn't he on Lyman Zerk? That guy. Is that who that is?
Yeah, not Saul Goodman. But yeah, that's what you're talking
Saul,
about.
yeah. Carl Reiner.
No one's even watching at this point.
Yeah, we're going off-road.
Yeah, Carl Reiner, Ocean's 11. Yeah.
Well, anyway, Rob Reiner, actor turned director, and this is Spinal Tap.
But yes, this is Spinal Tap. That's I always thought, I forget Rob Reiner directed that. I always think it's the guy who did For Your Consideration.
Oh, Christopher Guest.
I always think it's him.
Well, because it's so many of the people, they all went on to be part of his troupe for the most part. At least a lot of the main guys like Harry Shearer and Michael McKean and Christopher Guest himself plays Nigel Tufnell.
Brendan Fraser.
But Rob Reiner, he's even in the movie as the documentarian, kind of breaking the fourth wall and stuff. And yeah, I mean, that definitely, maybe that makes a lot of sense. So, I guess Rob Reiner decided he was kind of done with that, and then Christopher Guest just picked up the mantle and carried it on. But, people still reference Spinal Tap, and it is, a pretty...
Oh, Christopher Guest is in Spinal Tap.
Yeah. He's one of the band members.
Yeah, see, I haven't seen it, so I can't comment.
No, he's Nigel Tufnell. But it does a great job at sending up, that particular rock and roll culture as well as setting up the mockumentary format, that Christopher Guest would later.
Oh, he wrote it.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. That I did not know.
It's been a whole press. I get that's part of my... And Tim Burton directed Nightmare Before Christmas.
Definitely he did.
And Phil Lord and
Chris Miller directed Spider-Verse.
Yeah,
totally. Hell yeah.
All right.
And then I just wanted to name a couple movies and not talk about
Quickly
them.
name them. We can't. I don't want to hit 60 minutes
So
here.
if you're here and you want to check out some bitch and cult movies that were also debuts, Repo Man by Alex Cox with Emilio Estevez is great. The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension by W.D. Richter, also great. Hedwig and the Angry Inch, John Cameron Mitchell, hell yeah. Wet Hot American Summer, David Wayne, hell yeah. Diner, Barry Levinson, and Airplane. Airplane by
really?
Zucker Abrams Zucker is a directorial debut, and that kicked off the rich genre of parody film.
All right, guys. Well, we must have named at least 30 directors.
A lot.
I know for sure we did over 30. We must minimum 30 directors. Who did we miss if you made it this far in the video? I'm assuming this video got 500 views.
Where are all those Zach Braff fans coming to yell at us for Gardens?
Oh, well, there you go. We mentioned him. Forgot about that.
I mean, I've never seen Garden State. So.
That's a great film.
Is it?
I love that film.
Well, I gotta see it.
I love that
It's
film.
a divisive indie movie.
Divisive?
I know some people who vehemently hate it and some people who really love it.
I think some people hate it only because of how loved it was, and then they thought it was overrated. It's one of those movies, you know? But I do love that movie.
Hell yeah.
All right, guys. Well, did Crash, was that his directorial debut?
Paul Green or no?
Paul Greengrass.
No, who directed Crash? Shit.
Paul. Oh, God. Paul.
Yeah,
that's right
Paul
there.
Haggis. Paul Haggis.
Because I know he'd written a lot. Was that his directorial debut?
Oh my goodness. Let's find out. Oh my goodness. Director, 13 credits. Paul Haggis. No, he directed Red Hot.
Never mind. The Chili Peppers movie.
Yeah, yeah, woo. With Balthazar Getty.
Okay,
Gugino.
so there was Red Hot. All right. And I thought I had another one.
What about Ron Howard? What was his
Splash?
directorial debut?
Might have been Splash.
Okay.
Whatever, guys. All right, we can't just name everyone's directorial
This
debut.
podcast is going to be like a song where we just keep talking and it fades out very slowly over time. Just like, if you want the extended play, you're going to have to buy another.
All right, guys. Well, you can subscribe to the Reject Nation. Click that notification bell. And thanks, Andrew Hayes, for this request. Only took a short amount of time to film.
Hell yeah. We'll let you know Ron Howard's directorial debut next time.
Whoa. Come on, John. Go.
He's directed 45 films, and the first one was Grand Theft Auto.
Oh, based on the hit video
Based
game.
on the hit video
from the
game from
2000s.
the late 70s. Hell yeah. And he wrote it with a brother of his. There
See you guys.